Good evening. Welcome again to a session of engaging religion and politics. Sadly to say, this is our fifth and final installment. We've been broadcasting here from the chapel at American Baptist College in Nashville, Tennessee, an institution steeped in social justice. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of this great initiative that my friend Neely Hicks invited me into. So as we begin this last evening, I'm going to turn it over now to Neely, who is in DC.
Yeah, hey Davey, sorry to not be there with you tonight, but super excited to be here near Washington, DC. I'm just about 20 miles away, and I'm at my daughter's home in Rockville, Maryland. And it is a sad thing to think about tonight being the last night of this 5-part series. I think that we've covered a lot of ground. This series is based on the Statement of Conscience, which if you've not already signed that, I hope that you will still do it. This is a living document. It's not something that is just supposed to espouse what we believe in. It's supposed to lead us on to practice. And that's what this series has been about, engaging us in the practice of these calls to action. And tonight we have got some amazing guests. So, Davey, I'm gonna, first of all, I do want to just introduce the topic for tonight. So tonight's topic is point 4 in the Statement of Conscience. We will stand against the oppression of those whose human rights are trampled upon. Until all are created equal resounds not only in word, but in practice. We're going to be talking about how do we move towards this ideal? What can we do in our homes, our workplaces, our houses of prayer, and our nation to achieve this goal? So, Davey, why don't you begin? We'll start hearing more about our guest.
All right, I want to stand corrected if I need to be, if I mispronounce these first two names. Rahma Abdulaleen. I hope I said that right. If not, there she is. Did I say your name correct? If I didn't, will you please properly pronounce it?
It's Rahma Abdulaleen.
Rahma Abdulaleen. I put a syllable in there, wasn't supposed to be there. Thank you so much. Rahma Abdulaleen, I just said it again, I'm sorry, is the executive director of Karama Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights, where she works to create a global network of advocates knowledgeable about the gender equitable practices of Islam and are able to advance the cause of Muslim women's rights in legal and social environments. As Karama's executive director, she works with scholars to empower advocates about the rights Islamic law grants to women and to educate Muslim women in Islamic jurisprudence, leadership, and conflict resolution so that they may become the leading agents of change within their communities. Ms. Abdulaleen is a frequent presenter at continuing legal education programs and an adjunct professor at the University of the District of Columbia, David A. Clark School of Law. She graduated from Duke University with a double major in religion and sociology and a certificate in markets and management studies. Ms. Abdulaleen obtained her Juris Doctorate from the University of Michigan Law School. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
And again, the next one, I'm struggling and I'm going to make my best effort. Anurima Bhargava. If you would straighten me out, I would appreciate it.
You were not far off. Anurima Bhargava.
Say that one more time.
Anurima.
Anurima, okay. The last name?
It's Bhargava, but you can, the pronunciation you had was really good. So I'm glad.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. She is the Vice Chair of United States Commission of International Religious Freedom. She is a civil rights lawyer with extensive experience in various roles advocating for members of underrepresented communities. Before founding Anthem of Us, where she currently serves as president, she was the chief of the Educational Opportunities section of the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice, where she led the division's efforts to provide equal educational opportunities for all students. She has served on numerous task force and working groups, including at the White House prior to joining the Justice Department in 2010. Ms. Bhargava served as the director of the education practice at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where she worked to expand educational access and opportunities for students of color. She previously worked at the New York City Department of Education and clerked at the Southern District of New York. She earned her law degree from Columbia Law School and graduated magna cum laude from Harvard College. She was born and raised on the South Side of Chicago. Welcome. Welcome.
It's great to be here with you. Thank you so much.
And next we'll go to Dr. Veda Biliyar. Dr. Veda Biliyar is a practicing psychiatrist of Hindu Indian origin who immigrated to the United States in 1981. And he's been active in the Hindu Cultural Center of Tennessee since 1990, serving in various capacities as a teacher, youth programs director, and chairman of the board of trustees. He is presently the chair of the Public Relations Committee and has represented the Hindu community in various capacities and participated in interfaith panels. Dr. Biliyar, welcome.
Thanks for the opportunity. It looks like I have a distinguished panel here, and it's a pleasure and a privilege, it looks like. Hopefully we'll have a nice discussion today.
Thank you. And next, Rabbi Shana Mackler. Rabbi Shana Goldstein Mackler has been a rabbi at the temple for 16 years. Prior to ordination at the Hebrew Union College, she earned a master's degree in 2003 and graduated Phi Beta Kappa from University of Florida in 1998. As part of her training in seminary, she served congregations in Ishpeming, Michigan, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, and Natchez, Mississippi, which is my home state, and as a chaplain at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Appreciating the warmth and hospitality of congregations in the South, she proudly became part of the temple's clergy in 2004. On and off the pulpit, Rabbi Mackler serves the Jewish and larger Nashville community through combining her love of Judaism with her passion for education, social justice, and interfaith collaboration, teaching, pastoral care, and activism. A member of Leadership Nashville Class of 2015, Rabbi Mackler was voted one of America's most inspiring rabbis in 2016 and recently completed the Brickner Rabbinic Fellowship for Social Justice. She is married to Major James Mackler, an Army veteran, an attorney, and they have 2 daughters. Welcome, Rabbi Mackler.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with you tonight.
So each of our panelists gets 5 minutes for introductory remarks, and we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. So Rabbi Shana, we're going to begin with you.
Like I said, it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I want to thank you for the warmth and the outreach for us to be here tonight as part of your series that has been going on for several weeks, discussing this incredible statement of conscience that you helped craft. You did most of the crafting among our clergy partners. It is going to be incredibly important, not just to speak out before the election, but also to figure out how we are going to come together as a nation after the election. We are choosing who we want our leaders to be, and we also need to choose who we want to be afterwards. And so we have an opportunity to make sure that all of the emotions, all of the feelings, all of the work that has been done and needs to continue to be done is done in collaboration and in partnership. That is something that is incredibly important to me as it is my community. And I know that we have been able to do wonderful things because we have done them together. Part of what we do as a congregation and as a community is stand with, by, and beside one another. We are stronger when we're able to stand together, and we know that this is the most important part of the work that we are doing, to hear one another's story, to recognize our vulnerabilities, to find those places where we meet, and to understand where we diverge, not to keep us separated, but in order to give us something to build a bridge toward understanding. The work that we do together in communities is going to not just make our cities more healthy, safer, but we're going to be a stronger nation and some people that can come back together. The divisions and the polarization that has happened, that has been going on and has only been magnified, have destroyed relationships, have caused consternation in families, in communities, in sacred communities. And we know we have a lot of work to do to bring justice, not just into our systems, but into our communities and our families as well, to recognize that. So I am deeply honored and privileged to be a part of this panel, and I look forward to our conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Mackler. I really appreciate those remarks. So true. Next, we will go to Dr. Biliyar.
Well, I'm not a scholar. I'm not speaking officially on behalf of any institution. I am a practicing psychiatrist. I am an immigrant. My early childhood has been in India, where still there is practice of class system and oppression in the society that continues even now. And I am an immigrant here for the last 40 years, and therefore I have a cross-cultural experience of practicing my faith in this country, and the experience that goes along with it as to the interface between, the liberty to practice my faith here and be able to relate to other people of faith. Therefore, this has been a wonderful experience for us as the immigrants from India and the Hindu immigrants. I have to say that the experience has been wonderful. Now, I'm a man of faith and man of conscience. I believe that we're all worshiping the same God, and that is another pet project or pet idea that I want to continue to celebrate and propagate and participate in any group that realizes that we're all worshiping the same God. And every believer, we believe in every human being has equal expression of the divine. Every human being is an equal expression of the divine. Everybody has enough divine in them that they're all expressions that we cannot separate one individual with the other. That includes other species also in the world, in the creation. Therefore, we respect every living being in this earth. Now, the Hindu community or Hindu immigrants in the United States, they're very eager to mainstream. They're very eager to make sure they connect well and they're integrated well and they're received well, and they are very, very eager to participate in the democracy and participate in the political process and participate in any way they can to be good citizens in this country. And this has been a wonderful opportunity. And a lot of our people have prospered in this democratic structure here, which is much better than the class system we came from in India. It's amazing how the Indians have thrived here and the Hindus have prospered here and building temples, religious institutions, and practicing patterns that are independent of their own origins, that they have liberated themselves from the orthodoxy of the Hindu religion. Now, in terms of a brief idea about what the Hindu religion is all about, I want to mention just a few things. It's a dharma-centered religion where there is a quest to perfect yourself and purify yourself and live in harmony with nature. We want to live a righteous way so that it will purify ourselves in the long run. Therefore, it's a lot of an individual pursuit rather than any indoctrination and propagation or conversion. None of those things exist. The other thing is the God, concept of God. We see divinity in everyone and everybody, and we see all of us as expressions of the Almighty or the great source. Therefore, we have a non-separate theology that guides us in understanding and relating to other people, that helps us with the equality concept. Now, we do have a sense of destiny, rebirth, or things following according to karma, theory of karma. Therefore, we believe things happen for a reason and things are destined to happen, and that our job is to make sure we continue the cycle with respect to the fact that it may be the divine or the ultimate factors, the karma will affect the outcome. The last thing that we want to mention, that this is not an activist religion, but very accommodative religion. And I come from a background where multiple religions coexist in the Indian subcontinent. And even though there are a lot of criticisms and comments, we have lived with neighbors of different religious practices, and we have tolerated them well. In fact, I feel like there is less prejudice in India about other religions than in this country, for example, mostly from lack of education, lack of understanding, because of lack of familiarity, I feel like. Now, in terms of this debate or this panel, I'm very happy to hear that the conscience, voting with conscience, has been the theme, and I'm so happy that we are appealing to the conscience of people who make them think about what's right. And we have a whole epic of Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. They're all about deciding the dilemmas of where you stand in terms of protecting dharma and doing the right thing. Therefore, every individual has to think through and vote according to their conscience, or act according to their conscience. And then the question of individual responsibility. Again, our responsibility is to uphold the dharma, and our goal is to be mainstreaming well, or be able to contribute in a positive way, be harmonious with the rest of the. Therefore, let me go ahead and discuss later. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Biliyar. I'm taking mental notes of what we need to come back to.
Sure.
Again, working in reverse here, we will go next to Anurima. And if you would like to share some introductory remarks.
Sure, thank you so much. And I am honored to go after the last two speakers. I feel like I grew up in preschool and otherwise in a Jewish tradition, and I am born and a practicing Hindu, and in many ways, the ways in which I think about the values and just to pick up on the idea of dharma and duty, that it may be something that we think of individually. The way in which we practice it is in community, right? And the way in which we practice it is in the ways in which we try to bring those kinds of the principles of justice, of fairness, of being in one with nature into the communities that we're a part of. And I think it's in many ways, while I'm not someone who necessarily practices in some overt way, every day I practice in what we try to do is to practice in what we do and how we treat one another. And I think it very much is the underpinning of why it is that I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer and work for justice in many different forms. And so when I think about this, I wanted to talk about a couple of things in the introductory remarks, which is first that I think there's so many ways in which we've seen community come out of faith, and so when I think about, and I'll give one example, I was working as part of a team at the Justice Department in Ferguson a number of years ago, and I remember that we had many months of trying to investigate and to look into what happened in Ferguson and how to bring justice to the community there, particularly to children and those who were looking for how it is that they can actually forge a future out of a time that had broken communities in pieces. And And when we concluded that process, I remember it was Bloody Sunday, and I went to church. And the reason I went to church is because I wanted to be in a place in which we could talk about what was needed and what was right and how we needed to move for the country and for our communities, not because it was something that was mandated by law or was the ways in which we had to fit within a system, but because it was right and it was moral and it was what it is that we wanted to do as part of a community. And I could feel that in places of worship in a way that I couldn't feel it necessarily, even in the kind of work that we were doing. And I needed it for the work. And I think we needed it for the work in so many ways to be able to realize that part of what we were trying to do was to reflect a moral compass, to reflect what it meant to have faith and trust in one another, and what it meant to be in community, and in all those ways could bring that to what it is that we were doing in the world of justice. And many years later, about 2 years ago, I was asked to serve on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And there's much I can talk to about what we do on the commission. It may not be familiar to everyone here. The commission was set up 20 years ago as part of the International Religious Freedom Act, and our responsibility is to really look at what's happening in terms of conditions around religion and religious freedom throughout the world, and to make recommendations to the president and to the State Department and to Congress about what it is that we should be doing to make sure that people are able to believe or not to believe and to practice their faith. And I joined as someone who had grown up again with many different religious influences in many different spaces, but as someone who was centered in Hinduism and in many ways have learned about what it means to work with people who have religions that are very different than mine, that in many ways they might have worked on things domestically in the context of civil rights in a very different way, and in fact dismantling the very things that I tried to build with my life, and yet we had something in common in terms of trying to actually make sure we could protect the ability of people to practice their faith in a way that was grounded in dignity, that was grounded in respect for one another, and so that's and that was grounded in respect and dignity for each of us on the commission, even though we come from very different religious practices. And so I'm really happy to be here to be able to talk about how we bring this practice of what I would say justice and equality, but really about dignity and belonging. How do we actually have that be something that we can when we have empty wells, we can fill them through the ways in which we are part of communities of faith. And we can also continue to move on and have justice be something that fills those communities of faith too. So with that, I will turn it over to my esteemed colleague.
Dignity and belonging, that's the words that we need to remember as we go through this week ahead for sure. So Rahma Abdulaleen, I think I still didn't pronounce your last name right, Abdulaleen. There, I think I got it right that time. Did I?
Yes, thank you so much. And it's actually amazing. It's almost as if you guys planned this, because the name of my organization is Karama, Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights. And Karama means dignity. And that is the fact that you guys, I was like, wow, you guys almost planned it like that. We are the oldest women-led Muslim nonprofit in the United States. We were founded in 1993. And that was a time when the three founders were so upset about how Islam was being portrayed in the media. And looking back, you're like, wow, 25 years ago, that was baby steps compared to what we're dealing with now. And what they really wanted the world to know and the US to really know about Islam. And so that's why they named dignity was very important. We focus on the dignity of all human beings as our mission. And we really educate our fellow Muslims and fellow human beings about Islam, because so many people have such non-true, I won't say untrue or fake, but the ideas about what Islam is all about. Islam commands Muslims to love our fellow human beings. We don't try to create arbitrary hierarchies based on race or gender or ethnicity or immigration status. Diversity is a key principle in Islam, and it's something that should be celebrated as divine blessing rather than feared or loathed. So we really talk about the hallmark of Islam being justice and diversity, and we really feel that there's no justice without equality amongst everyone. And so this year, 2020, has been rough on the Muslim community. The last several years have been. We've been dealing with so many issues as a community, first with the Muslim ban that really kind of pushed us to the forefront of thinking about how Muslims are treated here in the United States. It really made the community look inwards and talk to each other, because Muslims are we're not, where there's so many different communities within Islam here in the United States. There are people who come from immigration backgrounds. There are some, as we call them, homegrown. We have a substantial portion of the Muslim community here in the United States that are African American. So that has been really a growing period for the Muslim community here in the United States, because this has really been the first opportunity in 2020 that we've had to say, hey, part of us got really riled up about the Muslim ban, but other people did not get riled up about Black Lives Matter, and that's an issue, and we need to talk about it. So we've had a lot of intra-community discussions and talking about how we really, as a community, need to become more involved in politics, because we really need people to really see us as fellow Americans. I mean, we really, the fact that we've seen how the two Muslim women have been treated who are congresswomen, and it's like, wow, it's amazing how they're treated compared to how the two Muslim men could really fly under the radar. Nobody seemed to attack them at all. And then two Muslim women, all of a sudden the attacks have come out, and so we really have really gotten the community to really talk and focus and say, hey, we need to put our political clout. We are a large part of this country, and we need to really be proactive in what we do. And there's been a lot of talk, because there is a very big push in some parts of the Muslim community to assimilate. And then there's a lot of people in the community who are like, no, we're who we are, and we're not going to assimilate. We're going to be proud of where we came from. So it's really a growing pain for the Muslim community that has been here since the founding of this country. But it's something that we really, as a community, need to continue to think about. But one thing is sure, is that we have gone out in really to talk about why we should be involved in politics. It's no longer acceptable to say it doesn't bother us, because now we see how it directly affects us. So we really are looking forward to this election to really kind of show our Muslim clout and being involved in the American political system.
Right. I just want to add something right there before you get into the questions, Neely, is in my own quest to learn my own history, scholars have now discovered that a lot of the first enslaved folks had Muslim backgrounds, and history, even as it wrestles with telling the correct story of slavery in this country, that's always been a missing piece, that they came here with an established historical religion that is often missed. And I recall watching I call it the New Roots, with all of the rappers in it, and it actually picked that up. And I was shocked and taken aback, and now that's my favorite Roots version. I was raised up on the first one a long time ago. Anecdote has nothing to do with the conversation, but you brought it up, so thank you very much for that. Neely?
I love it. I love it. I love it. And Davey, it's just good to feel your energy, even though we're far away from each other. It's really good to feel that and hear that comment. So one of the things that we wanted to begin with tonight was to talk about oppression, because if we're going to talk about dignity and belonging, I think we first have to identify, where is there oppression? Because if you're someone who feels that you are already treated with dignity and respect and belonging, then you may be utterly blind to how other people are treated. We can live in a cloud and think that everybody is treated the way that we're treated, or the way that our friends are treated. And then unless we are intentionally going into community with other people who are outside of our immediate circle, we can miss the ways that they're treated with oppression. So we're going to look at it from the individual perspective. What does it mean to be treated or to live in an oppressive culture, both on an individual perspective and then on a systemic level. We need to identify those things before we can look at how can we as people of faith move forward and build this better world that we believe in. So I asked Dr. Biliyar now if you would give us kind of a psychological profile of an oppressor. What does that look like?
The oppression can be from individuals or institutions. I think we are more dealing with the institutional oppression and the oppression of large groups of people. But as a psychiatrist, I deal more with individuals who oppress the family members, for example. And sometimes people feel the pressure from the institutions like the church, workplace, or the government sometimes. For the feeling of when there is oppression, you see there is somebody who is oppressing, and there is a process of oppression, and there are victims of oppression who are being victimized, and unfortunately, all of them are contributing to this kind of perpetuation of this kind of oppression. Because there are individuals who abuse power in their authority, whether it's family, workplace, or the institutions. And the victims, they have a victim mentality sometimes. They feel abused, neglected, disenfranchised, marginalized, sometimes enslaved. And they have become defeated individuals and groups where they shut down and don't make their voice. And it's very common in India how suppressed people become so passive and meek, and they don't express themselves. They don't have words to say, and they don't want to because they don't want to be seen as having an opinion at all. That's a big problem. Now, this is sustained. The system of oppression it's sustained by dictatorial systems, victim mentality, and lack of resistance. And if there is no free press, or there is tendency to silence speech, especially within families, there is a lot of silencing of speech in India and some of the Orthodox families. And of course, lack of factual information. If the rhetoric, or if people don't respect the facts, but just opinions are the only thing that matter, we have a problem there too. That makes it possible for people to be oppressed. Now, she asked me about the profile of the oppressor, and it's very clear that they are using their power, and they have problems using their power. Power corrupts. It's very clear. Now, initially, these people tend to be narcissistic. They tend to be a little narrow-minded. They also tend to be insecure. They tend to be greedy. They tend to be power-hungry. And if you see that, they think they're the chosen ones. Therefore, the real leaders know why they're chosen, and they don't feel that they're the ones who need to be chosen. And they think they're above the law, whereas normal leaders are aware of the restraints of the law. They're intoxicated by the power, where the real leaders use their power with restraint, and they surround themselves with people who agree with them. They have a certain difficulty listening to dissent, disagreement, and other opinions. And they lose touch with their true purpose of the authority, and they use it to just help friends and supporters, and they forget that they are answerable to the bigger community because they're in the position of authority. And again, if they don't keep in touch with the people they have the authority over, and they lose the trust of the people that they have authority over, and eventually they practice, they end up with abusive practices that are very difficult for them to get away from. And then they have to use, they hang on to power through because of increasing insecurity, they hang on to power by illegal means or oppressive means, and the oppression gets worse. And finally, somebody establishes balance, and in the Hindus' religion, we believe that there is always going to be order that's created after the chaos.
Thank you so much. Davey, I know that your head is filling up with questions,
Yes.
and I'm going to turn it to you.
I have one that, even as I listened to Dr. Biliyar and his description of oppressors, and as he talked about institutions and individuals, as institutions are really just social constructs that require personal agency to really give them movement. It's kind of framed this question, and hopefully we'll work it out. As a country that began as a supposedly Christian nation, and in light of the pervasive national narrative that seeks to join patriotism and nationality with Christianity, as persons of other faiths, how does this narrative help or hurt our collective quest for social and human rights in this country? So, and what can you say, how does it help or hurt, but also what do you need to say to us Christians that may be a blind spot to some of what we need to know? And I'm going to start with Anurima.
Anurima.
Arima. I want to start with you. Please excuse me.
Thank you. I think there's a couple of different things for us to hold on to. So first is that no matter what our religion is, including for the many Christians across America, part of what I think is important for us to recognize is what our faith asks of us. And I think that there's not a faith or a religion that any of us are a part of that doesn't say that we should love our neighbor, that it says that we shouldn't watch out for those who are in need, who are in poverty, to make sure that we take care of one another. And I think in many ways what we're missing right now is the ways in which all of us need to practice that, and practice that not only for people who share our faith, but for those around us who don't. And none of our faiths, certainly in the ways where I know that all of us practice them, suggest that we don't do those for people who don't share our religious background. That is not the tenets of any of our faiths, that you don't watch out for your neighbor if they might have a different faith that they practice. And so I think the part that we're missing is to go back and to realize what is at the center and the core of what it is that we all are to practice, and to actually have that be part of what is shared and promulgated across the country. And if we get to that point, I think the sense that we are not a place where our borders are open to those who are in need, that our homes are not open to those who are in need, that we would turn someone away, that we would separate families, that we would, that we would tolerate violence for someone who may be struggling with a mental health issue, and instead of actually helping that person, they're met with violence, including by the state, right? And so all of those things are not part of the ways in which any of our faiths, I think, would suggest that we should build community, and who gets to be a part of that community, in the way in which we should treat one another. So I think that's the part that we're missing. And instead, what we've done is suggest that the ways in which to practice our own religions is to somehow denigrate or erase the other ones. And that's just not, we don't need, for Christianity to survive, for Islam to survive, for Hinduism to survive, does not mean that we have to cast out all of the other religions around us. So that's where I would start, and I'm sure everyone else has other parts of this to contribute as well.
Okay, all right. Ms. Rahma.
Well, as someone of not just a minority faith, but as an African American, I constantly know what it's like to be a minority. And so it's one of those things that we constantly, I can only be who I am. But here in the US, so often, because I have a Muslim first and last name, the first question I hear from people is, oh, what country are you from? And I'm like, here. And, oh, what country are your grandparents from? And it depends on how I'm feeling on a given day, whether or not I say, well, my people came over on slave ships. I sometimes get to that point when people keep on pressing me, especially when I'm coming through, you know, TSA and they're trying to question my US passport. And I'm like, no, I'm African American, I'm from here. And so, but it's a way that we have really kind of equated American as being Christian. And I think that's what we have to consistently fight against, is that, you know, the US was, you know, founded on this quest for religious freedom. And funny enough, it was religious freedom, but, you know, they came over here on a quest because they were being oppressed themselves. But what it really turned into, they ended up oppressing a whole race of people just because they could, for, you know, for religion. You know, it was white Christianity. You know, we're going to save the heathens from Africa. So really the ideals that the US was really founded on, we've never actually lived up to those ideals. And we have been able to continue the myth. I mean, I think that's part of the issues that we're dealing with right now, is that we have given our children this historical myth about how the US was founded and manifest destiny, and, you know, how we were just supposed to be from, you know, from the East Coast to the West Coast, not talking about how we killed all the Native Americans, how we dragged people halfway across the world as slaves, how we treated them, how we totally dehumanized the whole race of people. So I think as a country, we really need to stop and really talk about it. Like the fact that the 1619 project that USA Today did was controversial. I'm like, really? Is it controversial? I mean, for me, it wasn't. You know, my mother, you know, my parents were in the 70s, part of that first group of African Americans that went, you know, experienced affirmative action and went to great colleges. My mother was a Black Studies major. So I grew up knowing all about, you know, my Black history. So I knew all the background, but I was always amazed at how many people just don't know that background about just the US. And because I was a minority faith, and I feel like the way to know other people, you know, I'm sorry, doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I always thought religion. So when I went to Duke, I was really, I took New Testament, Old Testament. I remember asking my Christian friends, you know, college student poor, I'm like, can I borrow your Bible for my New Testament class? And not one of them said yes. And I was like, really? I thought you guys would let me borrow your Bible so I could study it. And they were like, no, I can't let you have it. I'm like, that's a problem. But then when I went to the chapel itself and asked the dean of the chapel if I could borrow a Bible, he was more than happy to help me with that, because he thought, oh, wow. But it was one of the ideas that I feel like the way you can know people is to learn more about their religion, because that is so many people's identity is in religion. I think that, yes, your identity goes with race and ethnicity too, but you can really learn a lot about a person by learning about their religion. And unfortunately, those of us who have minority faiths here in the US know much more about Christianity and Judaism than they know about us. And so I think the more people get to know us as just other people, it's just like, oh, if I hear another person say, well, we don't pray for, you know, you pray to Allah and we don't pray to him. I'm like, that is just the Arabic word for the one God. And the fact that you don't know that, and that you're kind of like, I believe in, you know, somebody else. I'm like, no, we're all monolithic faiths and we believe in the same God. So it's more of learning about each other. And that's why I think education is the key, and teaching the next generation that, you know, we are fellow human beings. We're all fellow Americans, and we have more in common than we have differences.
Amen. Amen. That's so true. That's so true. And I think that this is also indicative of the fact that we tend to hold our faith in a belief rather than in the heart and the actualized embodiment of religion often, because we should be practicing hospitality to the stranger. We should be doing all of these different things and just practicing the love of God. Like, is that not enough? And I mean, that keeps us busy 24/7 if we do it, you know, if we do it well. So I love where this conversation is going. We've got to have these relationships. And you want to go to Rabbi Mackler?
Yes, and we'll go to Dr. Biliyar.
Yeah, I appreciate what has been said so far. I fundamentally believe that we have to create those relationships and learn about one another. I also think, when, as Jews, we are a minority faith. We have had a presence here and had success integrating into the American community over generations. And much of that is the privilege, I think that many of us have, either socioeconomically or because we're white presenting, and that is not lost on me. But I do understand how that feels to be in that minority faith community when everything else around you is predicated on, a Christian understanding of the world, or of, values or belief systems, or, rights for others. And it's not, I don't want to say it's all Christians at all. It's a myopic view of Christianity that seems to have taken hold in the public arena. That public voice of religion is different, I think, than many of the pastors and clergy friends that I have. It's not their faith that's being trumpeted out. It's a very exclusive understanding of Christianity that I think is publicized. In the Jewish tradition, we pray in community, and we are taught that we have to have a window in our chapels and in our sanctuaries. We can pray anywhere, but the idea of having that window there is that reminder that what you pray for inside the building has to be lived outside the building. You can't just wall yourself in and not recognize that there is a great big world out there that is in need of those actions, right? Where we can't just close in on ourselves and not take that out and live out our faith out in the public. I think one of the ways that we can help bridge this gap is by recognizing that life is not a zero-sum game. I feel like all of this is, I feel like there's so much of this, the polarization is sort of fit into a binary understanding of the world. You're either this or that, right? And when we act, when I share my beliefs, it doesn't detract from yours, right? It's not a challenge to yours if I have something different. There's no, if you're talking about God's love, it's not, if I have some, it doesn't mean you necessarily have less. And I think the same thing goes with rights. And the same thing can be understood when we're talking about justice, right? If I have protections, if I have rights, if I have privilege, that does not mean I'm going to take it from you, right? To give rights, to give justice, to give, equality doesn't diminish yours. And I think when we live in a world that is always zero sum, if I'm going to win, you are going to have to lose. Or if you win, I have to lose. That's where we have this disconnect in being able to look at equality and include more people in either that love, from faith or from justice. We have to recognize it's just not zero sum. And I feel like that's where oppressors get it wrong, right? If they give any of their power away, they're going to have less, right? And that's the fear, I think, that comes from it. And so I'd rather turn, instead of power, really look at influence and how we can up that, because that only grows the more you share, right? It's a little bit of a different perspective to take there.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you, Rabbi. Dr. Biliyar, you want to respond?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell a story because this is right up with David's question, about the Christians. When I came to America, I practiced in a small town in Iowa. They hardly knew anybody from another faith. And their first question is, "Are you a Christian?" They don't want to see any other doctor. They want to make sure the doctor is a Christian. And I told them, what do you mean a Christian? Anybody who believes in God or has respect for the an authority, higher authority? Yeah, that's a Christian. Well, I said, I'm a Christian too, no problem, because I have no problem accepting as a higher authority. Therefore, a lot of, like Rama said, Allah means God. A lot of people just don't realize that we're all worshiping the same entity, but trying to put different names. And the other question about this nature of authority, and we are not used to churches or religious institutions exercising authority in India at all. The Hindus, don't have that kind of organized religion that exercises any authority and expectations. There are certain castes that have higher expectation. There's community enforced and not individually enforced. Therefore, I'm blessed with that kind of background where I can say that any type of practice is good enough as long as it uplifts you and gets you closer to a higher level of understanding about the universe and the creation, and be able to live in harmony with nature and other people, and respect the equality part. Therefore, I'm trying to get away from this authority, like Rabbi Mackler said, and into influencing people, into bringing them to the table for a discussion of the common belief that we all have, that we need to share this world.
Thank you. I have a Tuckerism that when love is not the law, power and authority become necessary for social order. And if I could just do a follow-up, Neely, I'm sure you've got questions too, but Rabbi Mackler, you made a statement as to that, and let me make sure I get it right, that to give rights doesn't diminish yours, and to grant power doesn't diminish your power. Is that kind of sort of? So I want to make sure I get that right.
I think that's how people, especially those who are afraid of losing any power, feel. If you share the power, if you share the table, right, you bring people to the seat at the table, that means you're going to have to give yours up. That's the way that they look at the world. I think that's where the threat comes. Instead of looking at power growing and influence growing by sharing it with others.
But in this country that is white dominated, primarily white male dominated, that when we measure it socially, economically, or politically, those who are not white and primarily white male don't have that power / influence. So if power and influence is a known quantity, why would the dominant culture not have to give up something?
I think they do. I think the idea is that we should move from power to influence, and to understand that there's a greater gift that's given through influence than it is through power, because power can, like you said, it can turn violent and oppressive, right? And people don't, I think we live in a world where it is zero sum. They don't want to give any power up. They don't want to bring in anyone to sit at the table, either to get rid of, someone who's already at the table, or to bring in another chair. I think people are afraid of losing that power so much. I think that's where we are. I think that's where we have to focus our attention, is to say, get a bigger table. Right? You don't have to lose anything in order to share that. But that's a risk, and that's a sacrifice. And if people are willing to do that was the question I asked on our high holidays. What are we willing to sacrifice? Those of us who have privilege, or those of us who want to see this, the healing take place, right? The investigation and the healing to figure out how we move forward. What are you willing to give up? Right. And so there is going to have to be some movement and some sacrifice, but that's how you draw near, right? Korban in Hebrew is the name we give to sacrifice, and it means to draw nearer to God, right? So what are you willing to risk some comfort? Are you willing to get, to lose some of your power, or to maybe give up your seat for someone else to be at the table? What are you willing? Your perceived sense of safety, right? Or your bottom line, what are you willing to sacrifice? And that has to happen if there is going to be growth. You can't heal if you're not going to take care of what's underlying that pain.
Okay.
Can I jump in here for one quick moment?
Yes.
I think about this a little bit differently, which is that I agree that there has to be some ways in which the table that has been set is different, and that means that that who gets to sit at the table, who gets to choose what's being eaten, who gets to set the menu, who gets to make the invitations to the table changes. And I think one of the things, the way in which I might depart for a moment is to suggest that there's ways in which we change who's already sitting at the table and who's doing the invitations and who's setting the menu. And I think one of the things that strikes me about the two Muslim congresswomen and two of their fellow congresswomen who together form the squad is that in some ways they're not asking to be at other people's tables, they're setting their own. And suggesting that there's ways in which there's a lot to be learned at each of these, right? And there's a way in which the questions about how power, and I think this is what's happening a lot around the world, is that power with regards to both money and politics, that religion is becoming increasingly a way in which to wield that power in the context of politics and money. And so what we see is what we've seen in places like Burma with the Rohingya, what we see in China with the Uyghurs, what we see in unfortunately what we may see in India, which is that there's ways in which the political process and the ways in which people want to build, through lands that, or want to have a labor force, that those are things where religion is being the tool that's being used to divide people and suggest how it is that who gets to even be able to survive or to be in their own country or to sit on the land. And so I think in a lot of ways, this question of, belonging and dignity, belonging to me would be, to go back to where I started, that there's a way in which we change this idea of who's making the rules, of who's sitting at the table, who's inviting people, who's setting the menu. And that dignity would suggest that, back to where I think the rabbi started, which is that, there's a difference between power and dignity, but you don't give up any of your dignity by suggesting that others have theirs, right? And in fact, that's where there's dignity, love, the positives here, the things that our faiths are here to celebrate. Those things they multiply when you give and when you share. And so I do think there's some just ways in which we should think about all of the tables that we're setting and how much we can learn from one another if we wandered around and checked in at many of them instead of suggesting that we all have to go to one.
Thank you. Rahma, would you like to weigh in on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important that sometimes I think we get this idea that we all have the same equal access to power. And I mean, I read a really good article in that, some people, some immigrants come, they're like, oh yeah, African Americans are set. I mean, nothing's wrong and, their lives are perfect. And you're like, do you know anything about the history of what African Americans have gone through in this country? And, I just did a 4-week series on racism for an immigrant Muslim community here in the DC area. And I realized that a lot of people just didn't know. And sometimes when the doctor was talking about oppressors, sometimes people don't even realize that they are oppressors. Sometimes that they are not going out of their way to be oppressive, but they're doing things. And you're like, do you know what you're doing? And, for some Muslims that I've interacted with, they come from other countries. They're like, immigrants and US is the best place ever. And there's no racism. And I don't understand why you're not successful. And, you had to stop and really peel back the layers and start with them. I started from 1619 and really told them the history of African Americans here in the US. And the number of people who were like, wow, I didn't know that. I had no idea. And I think that's part of the problem is that we don't know our history. And, I remember hearing it all the time, if we don't know our history, we're bound to repeat it. And that's the scary part, is that some of the things that are happening right now, it's scary to think that they have comparisons to what other people have done in times before when something horrible has happened. I mean, Hitler said some of the same exact things before he started really the Holocaust. Like, he did the same exact thing about Jews that some people are trying to do about Muslims today. And, even just dividing us in terms of race. It's like people are like, oh, African Americans should be fine. You guys have all this power. People care so much about you. There only have ever been 10 African American senators. That's something that people, for some reason, they think once we had a Black president, everything was okay. It's like, no, there's still some really underlying racism that comes about being a Black person in politics, being someone of a different faith in politics. And we really need to start talking about that. I mean, Senator Kamala Harris, the fact that they ridicule her about her name, they don't do it and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing your name wrong. It's a ridicule, like, I don't know how her name is, Kama, Kal. And it's like, you would never disrespect other people of normal names. I mean, the fact that we can't even pronounce the president of Google, CEO of Google's name correctly, when we all use Google how many times a day? It's like, we have to stop acting as if everyone has a level playing field and that, oh, you know, if we just make some room, it'll happen. We really have to, and, you know, really become, to me, join with our allies and really start putting our foot forward saying, hey, we need to have a seat at the table. And we're not going to wait for you to invite us. We're going to come in. And sometimes you have to do it that way. You can't always wait for an invitation. Sometimes you have to make your own invitation and join the table.
Yeah.
Neely, you better jump in here because, you know, I'll keep going. And
well, it's interesting conversation. And I think that as we look at this age and time that we're living in a pandemic, I'm reminded that at the very beginning of it, I interviewed an imam there in Nashville, Osama Balul, and he told me that his prayer for this pandemic was that we would recognize that we cannot be well until all are well. And I think that we've not seen that, like where we could have used this as an opportunity to say, okay, y'all, we all have to come together. We are not going to get through this unless we are together. Instead, we have continued to divide up our factions. What do our faith traditions say about coming together, being able to grow in beloved community rather than this otherism that has taken place in the US? I think, Davey, I actually want to get your insight on this because of Black Lives Matter, and I know that you've been very vocal and active there in Nashville, and I think that you can add to this.
well, you know, Neely and I crossed paths on multiple occasions in multiple places, and so does Rabbi Mackler, and I'm appreciative for their friendship and for their commitments to justice. I've been reading or rereading Charles Kimball's book, When Religion Becomes Evil. And he lays out 5 warning signs that as a Christian practitioner, I wrestle with myself. And so as I wrestle with my understanding of providing space for whatever someone else believes in, if I want you to honor what I believe in, then I feel I have a commitment to honor yours. And it's not about an acceptance, it's about me honoring your choice. Well, and a couple of the 5 things is absolute truth claims, blind obedience, establishing the ideal time, the end justifies any means, and declaring holy war. And normally when I was looking at this, when I first encountered the book years ago, it was but this time, as an inward look, when I look at Christianity, these 5 warning bells have been ringing for years. They continue to ring, and the majority of the Christian community acts like we don't hear them. And so, particularly as it relates to this country and with and the way in which I try to help my congregation is Christianity, in our community of faith, we have rights, R-I-T-E-S. But all of the human family has rights, R-I-G-H-T-S. And I must separate those two, that for the practice of my religious beliefs, they're rights, R-I-T-E-S. And I have greater choice, I have greater maneuverability in how and what I do with them. But if the imago Dei is in all of creation, then the idea of rights, R-I-G-H-T, I have no wiggle room. So for me, it's how do we take religion from our various places and make it less antagonistic to others? How do we make it less abrasive to others? How can we come together and not have to bring our absolute truth claims? And I know from just using Rabbi Mackler as friends, I have a couple of clergy that, you know, we get hung up on this Jesus piece that, and for me, I even rationalize it in my mind is that for me, if I just take the Messiah and place it here, we both are seeking the same thing. We both are living into it, or we're living because of it. So the other thing don't matter for me, but there are some who can't get past that. And so even as we seek to collaborate and come together, that just becomes a point that we just can't cross. Even in parts of Christianity, the subjugation of women is still an issue. That, and for in the Christian church, women have always been the backbone of it. They outnumber men participants, but they're the least empowered people in the church. So I don't know how I can help Neely. I mean, I'm hoping to listen, because one of the things that we've been working on here at American Baptist College is the idea of theological imagination. That imagination that allowed the slave to be preached to, slaves obey your masters, you are less than, and this is your lot. But then after hearing those sermons, we have spirituals that come up out of there, people singing, everybody talking about heaven ain't going. How is it that they were told something, but they feel something else? And so I think that the idea of theological imagination, I can be informed by the other faith traditions that exist in the world that at their core often have very similar foundational beliefs, if I can take time to listen to those. So I don't know, Neely, that's more of a statement. That's not a question in there nowhere.
Well, I appreciate that, and I want to follow that up with going to Anurima, who is getting ready to sign off. And so I want to turn it to you, because here we are right upon election night, and we are looking at a wide spectrum of what is going on within our country. Anurima, what can you tell us that will give us a word of hope and encouragement for what we should do as interfaith community coming together?
I think that that this is going to be a time, no matter what happens in the next couple of days, this is going to be a time where we have to turn to you, because it is going to be a time where the need to, you are the places where communities do come together. You're the places that people go in part to find a sense of hope, to find a sense that there are connective tissue between us. There's ways in which we are bound together. And I think having this be a time where, for no matter what our religion, whatever our faith or background, that not only for what we're seeing in terms of the divides and the politics of this country, but also what we're seeing in terms of the extraordinary needs of families and in particular of children during this time of COVID, where there are millions and millions who are suffering, and it is only going to get a lot worse as we go into the winter. And to really think about what it means to help each other in this time. And there are so many, just extraordinary examples of, I think about Sikh that are feeding, thousands of people. That there are temples where that's happening. There are churches where that is happening. And I think going back to those beginnings of what it is that we are coming together for, right, which is to feel less alone, to be able to figure out how we can help and support each other, even when we might not be able to stand next to each other. That is what we're going to look to from not only as an interfaith community across the country. That right now what we're seeing is like the way we're witnessing this X-ray of where it is that our bonds are broken. That's what we're seeing in this country right now. And part of what we have to figure out is how do we build some of that back up? And that means we gotta invest there. That's where we have to actually spend the time. And how do we do that when we're sitting here in rooms or in homes or in spaces on our own with our families, obviously, but just in this moment, I think is really something that that's where, to go back to where Davey was, it's just, it is where our imagination is going to have to come in, right? I don't think that we've had a more challenging time in terms of how do we actually have a sense of community, have a sense of trust, have a sense of faith and belief and hope that things are going to get better for all of us. That all of that is being tried in a way that I don't think we've ever, at least I certainly have never witnessed in my lifetime. And so I think we're gonna need to really rely on each other. And I think, I wish I had done this earlier, or thought of it earlier, which is, and maybe I will send it, I'll put it, and maybe we can put it up somewhere, which is, my parents and I recorded a video a couple of weeks ago, and I'll say out loud that it is a story of a shared journey. It is a story of one of decency and many other things. It is also a story that involves Vice President Joe Biden, and I think in some ways that but that's not what it is about. It is about what it means to find something in common, and in our case, it was grief, right? And so the reason why I would have loved to share it with all of you is because for me, that is what it means to practice our faith, was to be able to see someone and see that they have something in common with you in a moment. And in the case of the video, of my parents who were grieving the loss of a son at the same time that the vice president at that time, was grieving the loss of his son, right? And so I'll put that in, but I would say that that's what I'm looking for in terms of leadership, is just this sense that like there's love, that we have something in common, and we have and humanity in common, and most of all, that it's not comparable. It's not who else is sitting at the table. Dignity is inherent to us. That is why we have to stick with dignity, because every one of us has it. And it's not because equality is asking a question about where we're standing in terms of the people who might be next to us. Dignity is asking the question of where we're standing ourselves, and how do we make sure that our ground is rich, the ground that we're standing in is rich, and that we can survive and thrive in it. And I think that's why it's important to go back to that. And what it is that the dignity requires, which to me, at this moment, if we could get back to simple decency and care for one another, I think we would be way far ahead of the game in a way that we are struggling right now.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Anurima, for joining us tonight, and we look forward to continue talking with you in the days and weeks to come. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm going to put this video in the chat, and if you guys see it, great. And if not, I hope for that I have a chance to work and spend time, more importantly, with all of you at some point soon. It's a real honor to be able to be part of this conversation tonight. And I'm only going off because I have some things to do for the next couple of days, and they're pressing. So I will see you all soon.
Thank you so much. And I just have one question before you go.
Yes.
I've been so impressed with you. So if I tell people that I know you and you hear my like kind of run along with that and say, yeah, I know him, he's a great guy and all that, or rather me not tell nobody I know you. Let me know.
I would be honored. I would be honored for so many reasons, not the least of which you have behind you the ways in which I think we all have to, I don't know if it's trees and hands and color and richness, and that's what you're bringing, you know, you're sitting in front of and bringing to all of us. And so I would be honored to be part of that, and to be part of any story you want to tell. Just, you know, try to have it be a little bit of the kernel of the truth. And, you know, and I appreciate the roots, young, you know, the new versions, the old versions, and everything in between. So, you know, my password to most of my things is Questlove. So we'll just end on that note. I should probably not say that publicly on Facebook, but here we are. I'll have to go change that now. But yes, I will. I'm here for all of it, and to do this work in solidarity.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Biliyar, I got a question from some of what Anurima said. What is it about our mind, or whether it's our mind and our soul, I don't know, that makes change so hard to where we will sometimes not only fight, but we will kill, just in the challenge of beliefs that are purely no more than beliefs, that even as we say faith and knowledge is not the same, but sometimes we make faith synonymous with knowledge. But what is there something in our mind? Is it something, how is that processed in your understanding as a professional that could possibly give us some clarity or some direction of how do we move people who feel so clad and iron and concrete in their beliefs and their position?
Well, this whole idea of managing differences, you know, people who are insecure with themselves, or they are afraid of others or anything different than what they're comfortable with. See, with more education, people become more broad-minded, more accommodative, and they're able to handle the bigger truth. Whereas people who are living a simpler life, they're more interested in preserving their way of life, and they indoctrinate their children or the people into kind of having healthy doubt about other people, or be cautious and be, you know, again, we teach that, you know, and we had to preserve our nest egg, nest, like our family. We want to protect our family. Therefore, everybody has that natural instinct to kind of teach them their way of doing things, and this is the way we do it. Anything different, just doubt them, or, you know, don't just take it for granted that everybody knows what they're doing. We want to do it this way. For that mentality continues, and fear of others continues, unless they're open-minded and continue to grow and educate themselves and have a positive experience. Suppose they didn't have a positive experience of being exposed to a person of different religion or different culture or different whatever, and that initial experience goes wrong, the prejudice gets stronger and worse, and they migrate towards like-minded people, and then they become their own clique of people, and they perpetuate their own belief system, and they move farther and farther away from the educated group, or people who are willing to keep on learning and enrich themselves with the possibility of being able to accommodate and understand and work with the bigger world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's just a great description of what happens, is that I think people do really get locked into, this is the way I believe, so I have to stay in this lane and only believe this, indoctrinate others to believe the way that I believe, because maybe there's fear that if people don't believe like you do, what if you're wrong? What if you're not right? You know, you have to be right. I think that's what people are really fearful of. And it seems like people are intent on legislating a particular religion rather than living it?
Well, that's where I was going to bring up the discussion to these two things that I've been watching in the American mainstream. One is this SBNR movements, or spiritual but not religious movement, that seem to have an equalizing tendency with all the religions. It looks like they're all moving into this, we're all spiritual, we all believe in higher power and bigger factors controlling and be aware of the humanity and all that, but they don't want the organized religion part of it, which is a wonderful movement, equalizing effect. I feel like I'm not going to be against them, even though sometimes I feel like our temple attendance or church attendance goes down because of this tendency, but it has an equalizing effect. The other thing is, I always feel comfortable interacting with people who have some kind of faith of some kind. They have a belief system or a moral code that they live by. They live by some, principles. And those people, I feel like they're comfortable, and we need to promote that kind of existence where you live according to what you believe in, and people can trust you to be who you are. I feel like it's part of your individual identity. Integrity is part of your identity. And if we promote that, that is not going to promote division, but it will promote individual growth without prejudice.
Thank you, because and let me ask Rahma, I have a huge screen here, so that's why I'm pointing over there. Rahma, you're up in the far left corner. So Dr. Biliyar said that fear, and as I was thinking about some of the alt-right, white nationalist type groups that who all purport to have some level of Christian grounding and understanding. From your perspective, do you see their fear? Or would you agree with what Dr. Biliyar says? Or what's your perspective in that regard?
I don't see their fear, but I do see their ignorance. And I see their ignorance because I feel that they don't know me. And so that they are judging me as a Muslim, not knowing anything about Islam, and just kind of being like, well, she hasn't accepted Jesus as her savior, so she's bound to go to hell. And I realized that it's one of the things that for a lot of them, they've never met a Muslim. There's so many people who are like, do I know a Muslim? Do I know anybody who's a Muslim? And it's something that, I've met plenty of Christians because I'm in a minority faith, but it's something that we don't even think about. My niece is 7 now, but when she was in preschool, she's 4 years old, and I was driving her home from school, and she said, so what are we doing for Hanukkah? And I'm like, oh, you mean Kwanzaa? Thinking African American. She's like, no, Hanukkah. My friend Samuel's having Hanukkah. Like, when are we celebrating Hanukkah? And I remember thinking, you know what? We're going to go to the mall. They have a Hanukkah celebration. You can go to it too. And she was like, yeah, I'm going. And she was the only non-Jewish kid there enjoying Hanukkah. And they were like, why is this girl here? But it was something that I felt like, you know what? She needs to experience it because we are not going to always be surrounded by just other Muslims. And as a young child being exposed to other religions, I think it's a great thing because she can say, well, they celebrate different things than me. And, I don't celebrate Christmas and I don't celebrate Hanukkah, but I celebrate Eid. And this is what my religion is about. And look what's yours about. And she's intrigued by it. And I think that part of the ignorance of the white nationalists and the alt-right is that they've never experienced anything but what they have. I think it's similar to, I grew up in Philadelphia and I call it the biggest small town. There's some people who have never gone further than maybe New Jersey. And they are scared to death to go any place outside of Philadelphia. I think a lot of people are like that with religion. I think that a lot of people have never experienced any other religion. They really think that if they learn about any other religion, it'll take something away from their own instead of it just being knowledge like everything else. My nephew went to a Muslim school for a while. He went to a Quaker school. He graduated from a Catholic high school. He went to a Jesuit college, and he was like, he loved it. He was like, I learned about all different types of people. I can get along with anybody. And it's because he was constantly exposed to different types of people. And I think that when you're not exposed to different types of people, you only think that the whole world thinks just like you. The whole world looks just like you. And if you're in this kind of very insular world of everybody else is, everybody else has the same ethnic background as me. Everyone else has the same religious background. Because I know everyone else on this panel has the same. There are people who practice your religion totally different than the way you practice it. But are you going to judge whether or not they are Christian enough or Jewish enough or Hindu enough? And I'm always like, you know what? I don't live in a glass house. So if somebody tells me they're a Muslim, I'm going to give them the greetings and say, you're a Muslim too. I'm not going to judge other people. And I think too often we're so busy judging how other people are practicing religion instead of taking our own religion into our heart and really being focusing on ourselves. And I think that more people need to focus on religion as being something that's personal to them and not the, not the buildings. I mean, I think that's what we've all had to learn in COVID is that, right when it was starting, it was close to Easter, Passover, Ramadan was about to start. And for Muslims, they were devastated that they couldn't go to their local masjids or mosques during Ramadan. Like that is our communal period. Like we jokingly say they're Ramadan Muslims. They're probably similar to Easter Christians or, Christmas Christians or high holiday Jews. They say with Ramadan Muslims, like, wait a second, we can't get together. But it really made us all turn inwards and think about what we were getting out of Ramadan personally. And I think more people have to really start thinking about their religion as something that is personal to them in their heart, and everyone else it's in their heart too. And to me, I always, I agree with the doctor. I love interacting with other people of faith because it's something that I feel like if you can respect other people as people of faith, then we can grow as a country.
Oh, I agree. Rabbi.
We were coming to the end of our conversation, so yes.
Yeah,
Rabbi.
I know we may actually run over, but I definitely want to get the Rabbi here. Around the same question Dr. Biliyar set up with us, and that he talked about fear and, as Rahma put it, ignorance. How do you see that?
I agree with both. I think it's both. I think it's fear of, quite honestly, I think it's fear of losing the power because they're afraid that whoever comes into power will treat them like they've treated others. I think that they can't see any other goodness or any other way than the way that they've been treating others. And I think that's the source of that fear, is that the tables will be turned. And I think it is utter ignorance. And I know that there have been those who have lived a life in the alt-right and have decided to leave based on their exposure and connection and relationship with others. And I really think that that is the way, it's getting proximate, it's building those relationships. When I grew up, my parents took me to midnight mass. And as I got older, we went and shared food and meals with those in the mosque. And this was something that I cherished because it not only made me help define my own faith, I got to see the beauty in others. And I really do appreciate the dignity of that difference, but also those similarities that we have. And I think that this is that time that we can help bring, even without our buildings. I absolutely fundamentally agree that this experience during COVID has helped us realize what it means to create a sanctuary and to have that time and what it means to have community, provided we're able to connect if we have the resources and the capabilities of connecting, and what it means to then go out into communities that don't, and how do you bridge that gap? Because I think the blessing of finding your small sanctuary is also a little bit of a danger zone, because we might think that that's all there is anymore, and we may not look any further than our own screens or maybe our own windows, and see our neighbors, especially if we don't live near others. And so where you sit determines where you stand. And if we're only sitting in that one spot, like we have been for 2020, I think we're going to really forget sometimes where we need to be standing. So I do think that those who fall into those hate groups have a deep sense of ignorance and a deep sense of fear of losing that power that they have assumed they have, and fear that others will treat them the same way. I do believe that religion has a job here. It's to be I like to say the headlights and not the taillights of justice. But I also think, as we like to say, religion is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I think if we have grown comfortable in our own faiths, if we have grown comfortable in our own privilege, if we have grown comfortable in our own belief, we need a little poking every now and then. We need to be afflicted to get disturbed and get vexed and move out of that comfort in order to see what's broken and what needs to be fixed.
Thank you so much. I've been deeply enriched, not only tonight, but over the course of the last 4 weeks. And I've actually picked up a little hope along the way, that in the multiplicity of the folks that we've talked to almost resoundingly have hopeful people. And it's almost like it's contagious, even as I try to protect myself from it. But I've definitely enjoyed this. Neely, you want to say something before we shut this thing down? And again, I appreciate all of you. And Dr. Biliyar, if you would stay on, we have a connection that goes back 30-something years that I really have to share with you before you get off.
Sure, I'll stay on.
Well, what I want to say is that over this 5-week period, I hope all who have watched have learned something new, have met someone new, have met a new faith tradition, a new system of belief, a new way of thinking that will help enrich your life. We are a great tapestry, and we are not meant to be all the same. And I think that when we weave this beautiful tapestry together, that we can value one another, we can build beloved community where all are treated as equal, not just in word, but in practice. I think that no matter who wins the coming election, that we have got our work cut out for us. There is healing to do, friends, and we need to be those who are willing to go into those places where people have been oppressed individually, systemically. We need to look at ourselves, we need to look at our systems, and we need to be focused on a sustainable we, you and I, rather than just an individual. I hope that you have a blessed week ahead. Reach out to someone who is your neighbor. Share the love of God in all of its forms, and have peace.
I definitely enjoyed this. And Rahma, I'm going to do the same thing with you. I mean, I'm going to talk to folks like we're big guys, so don't throw me under the bus. I mean, just roll with me on that, okay?
All right.
Pleasure. Rabbi, I am waiting for us to be back in each other's company again. Please give your regards to your husband for me, and I can't wait to be in your company again.
I look forward to it. And Dr. and Rahma and Neely, thank you for tonight.
Thank you.
If you have not voted, you need to go vote Tuesday. Go vote.
Yes.
Go vote.
From American Baptist College on the Holy Hill, we bid you adieu. Thank you so much for joining us for Engaging Politics and Religion. I'm David Tucker, my host, Neely Hicks. Come on back to town.
I'll see you soon.
Peace.